And we move into a very, very interesting sector, which it got a lot of people talking in their banking offices, their office, the homes, the banking sector. This year, a very, very, and I'll say very interesting sector. We look at the banking space, the news that we are hearing about, even government stepping in and all those things. And what are the implications for you? And I remember, give me your highlights for the year. Drop me a WhatsApp, drop me a text, a WhatsApp as well, and also Twitter and also on Facebook. And we will read your comments here. What were your highs and lows, and who were your winners and losers for the year 2018? Let's start first with a little clip that actually sets up the motion, or sets up the discussion for us to review for the year 2018 when it comes to the banking sector.
But within a space of just 1 year, 7 banks, all of them local, have gone down. And guess what? 3 of these banks, I was actually banking with them. Well, so First Capital Plus Bank, and then indeed the Construction Bank, and the very first one, which, well, I can't find my checkbook, was the UT Bank. Exactly how their collapse has affected, 1, the economy, 2, labor, and indeed, well, the general governance of the banking sector. That's what I'll be drilling down on, well, on AM Business. On the 14th of August 2017, UT and Capital Bank had their licenses revoked by the regulator and some selected assets and liabilities purchased by GCB Bank, and an over 2 billion cedis bond issued as a buffer in a move never seen before, and that has rocked the very foundation of the banking industry.
We have been engaging these banks for some time now. Those who had capital challenges by way of solvency, those who had liquidity challenges, we asked them to submit recapitalization plans, which were also going to address the liquidity challenges that they had, and they did. And we kept monitoring the situation as far as implementation is concerned. But we realized that they were not able to implement the plans that they submitted, and their financials kept deteriorating. So on the day that UT Bank went down, how did you report the issue? Did you see it coming as a journalist?
Anyone who has been following development in the industry would, and for a lot of people in the market, the players, they knew about all these things. The problem was when the action would be taken. And for a lot of people, the industry players, was when would Bank of Ghana take the action rather than something that wouldn't happen.
By August 1st, 2018, the Bank of Ghana revoked the licenses of yet 5 other indigenous banks in the country. On the same day, a license was granted Consolidated Bank Ghana, a wholly state-owned bank with a stated capital of 450 million, exactly a year after the 2 banks had collapsed. This time, the bond issued was $5.76 billion to also serve as a buffer.
Unibank and Royal Bank were identified during the AQR update exercise in 2016 to be significantly undercapitalized. The 2 banks subsequently submitted capital restoration plans to the Bank of Ghana. These plans, however, yielded no success in returning the banks to solvency and compliance with prudential requirements. The official administrator appointed for Unibank in March 2018 has found that the bank is beyond rehabilitation. Shareholders, related and connected parties had taken amounts totaling 3.7 billion cedis, which were neither granted through the normal credit delivery process nor reported as part of the bank's loan portfolio. In addition, amounts totaling 1.6 billion had been granted to shareholders, related and connected parties in the form of loans and advances without due process and in breach of relevant provisions of Act 930. Altogether, shareholders related and connected parties of Unibank had taken out an amount of 5.3 billion cedis, constituting 75% of total assets of the bank. In the case of Royal Bank, an on-site examination conducted by the Bank of Ghana on 31st March 2018 revealed a number of irregularities. Its non-performing loans constituted 78.8% of loans granted, owing to poor credit risk and liquidity risk management controls. A number of the bank's transactions, totaling 161.9 million cedis, were entered into with shareholders, related and connected parties, structured to circumvent single obligor limits, conceal related party exposure limits, and overstate the capital position of the bank for the purpose of complying with the capital adequacy requirement. In the case of Sovereign Bank Limited, as part of Bank of Ghana's investigations into the failure of Capital Bank Limited, currently in receivership, it emerged that Sovereign Bank's license was obtained by false pretenses through the use of suspicious and non-existent capital.
So that was the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, giving us some review of actually what went into taking those actions as a regulator. So I have my guest with me in the studio here. I know that's a talking point in your offices here. Who will make it, who will not make it, or maybe everyone is going to make it. But let's backtrack and how this started. People have questioned the Bank of Ghana on their approach. It was wrong, it was right, and things have rather gotten worse than we all thought it should be. Toma, you've been reporting on these things, always splashing the headlines and all the rest in your newspaper.
Well,
what does that mean?
Well, look, initially there were serious regulatory lapses. I still say that it took the IMF coming in for us to begin to
put pressure on the Bank of Ghana, actually.
Exactly, to correct those lapses. But since then, I think the Bank of Ghana has basically done the right thing. All right, I think they've basically done the right thing. I know the latest issue, this latest bonds.
We'll get to that, but let's get there.
But prior to that, I think Bank of Ghana basically has done the right, with some couple of exceptions, of course. The issue there is in the details. But broadly, I think they've done the right thing. You know.
So, Prof. Bobkin, let me bring you in. Banking issues, the way they went about collapsing some of the banks, the way they went about withdrawing the license. People have raised issues about the fact that there were some banks that were doing very well. They were not to mention names, you could talk about even the Royal Bank, that if they had given them a little space to correct their books, there wasn't a need to withdraw the license.
Well, I think that Bank of Ghana just didn't move in to withdraw their license. They had done the analysis, assuming you even want to believe that the current leadership had issues. Way back in 2015, there was an asset review in the banking industry that actually flagged some of these banks. And another one was done in 2016, and it was very clear some of these banks needed to go under the water. Perhaps we should have taken action then, and it wouldn't have perhaps gotten to where it got to in 2017 and all of that. Probably the 2016 elections may have played a factor in the government not moving in and perhaps trying to see what will happen. But you can see largely that we can blame the bulk of all that has happened there on the doorstep of the central bank as the regulator. People respond to incentives. So the kind of incentives the regulatory body put in place in itself was an issue. And largely you can trace it to one, that whether the Bank of Ghana itself is independent. Perhaps theoretically independent.
That is where my problem is. And I want to compare, and again, we are now getting there. Issues in the US where even Trump wants the Federal Reserve to drop rates. The Federal Reserve is saying, he appointed the chair. I'm sorry, we are going to base our judgment on development in the economy and not what the president wants or wants us to do.
But that's exactly what is going on right now. Government wants Bank of Ghana.
If government
wants the Bank of Ghana to drop rates, and Bank of Ghana is refusing to drop rates, that's the situation we're having right now.
But there are regulatory issues where the government comes in.
Now that is the issue. That is the issue.
The water
where that comes to Bank of Ghana money.
Yeah, and all these things played a factor in how some of these banks got their licenses.
Yes, there were political pressure.
The political interconnectedness and all of that actually didn't help us. You do want to mention that. Merchant Bank now, Universal Merchant Bank, and a whole lot of things in the banking industry that is created the impression that, hey, central bank had gone to bed with some of these players. Importantly, then you also want to examine the role of the central bank in all the numerous banking awards that we have seen over the period.
But those were independent. I mean, there have been arguments about, some would say that these were opinion-based awards. I would like Professor Bobkin's bank because of customer service. But when I do a due financial diligence on your numbers, you might not be good.
You know what? When you tell somebody that this bank is good, what you are saying is much more than what customers are saying.
But there was an opinion-based report.
And when you go there and you start praising these banks, it's much more than just what customers are saying. I'm not done yet. Then you also want to look at the role of auditors in some of these failed banks as well, whether they were actually doing their work. Of course, we know the audit opinion is always one page. What changes is the year. But that is fine. Somebody says it's always one page and all of that. So we want to see there are a lot of unanswered questions as to the role all these people, because auditors have a very important role to play in corporate governance, arrangement and development and all of that. It's very important. Then you also want to look at the shareholders. Their role in itself, which I think that has been below, the average. And some of them, if you look at the report that we have received, of course, we have to also leave some room for whatever and all of that. For some of the banks,
I don't know whether we should look at this at the last end, but I should bring it up. And Tuma, for you, whether the corrective measures have been put in place for those who caused these troubles for us, have we dealt with them? Has the laws dealt with them? Or some are saying that I read developments in the U.S. market and all the rest, and Bill Gates, and then also I've forgotten this Canadian billionaire in U.S. who is forecasting again that there will be another round of financial crisis. Have we put in place those measures that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we wouldn't have this problem again? The individuals have gone scot-free. There are banks that couldn't meet the minimum capital requirement. They knew that, government will step in and bail me out. So Bank of Ghana, give me a break.
We have put in place measures to prevent this thing from happening.
The laws, however, which always had been there.
The directive, especially the corporate governance directive. No, the corporate governance directive, because that is a failure of corporate governance, and that's what is being addressed. However, this our big manism syndrome here has not taken away the impetus, the incentive to misbehave as a bank owner or manager. What we have done is effectively that we have tried to block the loopholes through which owners and managers can misuse bank money. But we have not at all made any effort to disincentivize the desire to do such things, because everyone is still working free. I mean, despite all we have heard about how bank directors have misused money and bank managements have done absolute rubbish, and not one single person is being prosecuted. So what we are trying to do is to create a situation where they don't have the chance to do it anymore. But the incentive to do it is as strong, if it's even stronger now than ever, because people have now seen that if I can find a way to evade those loopholes, I can do it and go scot-free.
Professor Bobke, whilst we complain about this, some would also argue that it's about our laws. We don't live in a banana state. We have to let the laws work. And maybe that is where the problem is.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I'm not a lawyer. I'm told that the wheel of justice is very slow.
Yeah.
It can be as slow as going from here to maybe a brie.
I think it's broken.
doing a bridal match, actually.
Yeah,
I think really
and all of that.
broken.
But I think that we also have to give the benefit of the doubt to maybe the legal system and also trust that various investigations and all of that will be carried out to the very end, and all of that. These individuals also have their own rights and all of that. They should also be given the opportunity. We haven't heard from them that much in all this. Perhaps they should also get the opportunity to give their side of the story and all of that. And like we always say in academia, we know in part and we profess in part and all of that. So we see it that way. But we've seen quite a number of issues, not only in the banking industry, that perhaps do not give the average Ghanaian the confidence that these things would actually see the light of the day. Those are the issues. But my concern also is that I will prioritize retrieving those monies with possible interest than maybe they going to jail.
Pricewaterhouse is working on that one as well.
So I think because that is more important. I mean, that is more important than throwing 8, 10 people into Insawum and we losing billions of cedis. That is more important. So, and that is why I think that we don't need to more like hijack the system. Let's allow the receivers to do their work. Let's prioritize recovering those monies with the necessary interest. Let's all help in that regard, because if you look at our debt to GDP ratio that has gone up by about 11 billion cedis, it's largely because of the banking sector intervention in there. This is not lost money. As long as we'll be able to recover these monies and all of that from the system, and it should be possible for us to trace the transaction from end to end and recover those money. That is more important to me than 12 people finding themselves in a certain dark room somewhere.
Let's come to the minimum capital requirement, and we'll be tying in the Ghana cedi issue as well. Minimum capital requirement. When Bank of Ghana said 400 million Ghana cedis, we're all excited. The banks should be capitalized, fresh capital coming in. Earlier this month, the governor said 22 banks have met. It meant that technically about 8 banks were still racing to meet these new capital levels. Let me get your thoughts on how this whole capital requirement issue has been handled from the regulator's perspective, and how the banks themselves have handled it. And now we are hearing lots of developments wrapping up to this whole issue, and we'll be looking at that one as well.
George, this whole recapitalization thing, in fact, linked to the insolvency issues I've gone through, have made certain things clear to us. One is that well-governed indigenous banks are the exception rather than the rule. 2, the poor corporate governance shown by many indigenous banks is actually gets support from the political government of the day, depending on which side of the political divide you're on. It's very unfortunate. Politics has become so overwhelming in Ghana that even it affects the banking industry. There were banks that were supported in some way by the previous government, and different banks which are being supported in some way by the current government. Oh yes, so it has shown that the fortunes of indigenous banks is often
depending
who is
occupying
in power.
the seat at the Flagstaff House.
Exactly. So which effectively means that our political governors are helping to lower standards in the industry. Okay. Government has not been helpful. I support what the Bank of Ghana has done, but government has not been helpful in all of this. I mean, they've not really been helpful. Even this last minute bailout of some
bailout, which has been
even
confirmed
though it was
by my colleagues in
the issue is that the banks have been rewarded for sitting on their hands since September last year. Government will tell you that, okay, look, because MTN swept up all the money in the primary market in the Ghana Stock Exchange, it was difficult for a bank to.
But what was the plan again for these supposed banks in terms of raising capital?
They were asked to raise the capital in September last year when MTN do their IPO.
Let me bring in Prof. Bob Kinaf so we look at this issue of this whole recapitalization. And do you get a sense that for some of these banks, they knew that it's like a student misbehaving on campus, and then he knows that the vice chancellor is my friend, so I would misbehave to the head of department, and I will get away with it.
Exactly. Yeah. Thankfully, it's not University of Ghana.
The premier university.
Yes. So that's very interesting. I think that so many people,
Prof, hold on. I'll do a quick turn to Nana Otuechampo. He's also a banking consultant. I'll get his views on what is happening right now in the whole banking space with respect to this recapitalization. And I'll come back to my guest in studio here. Nana Otuechampo, good afternoon. And it'll be a good time to wish you a happy new year and hope that next year will be quite an exciting time for all of us. Let me get your thoughts. The banking sector, we've got into the last lap of the race. We knew that 5 banks, now we understand there are 6 banks, they were struggling to meet the capital requirement. Government is stepping in to bail them out. What do you make of this?
Well, there's an hour to go. 5 p.m. and then the door will be closed. But yes, the governor has said all along that the government said they were ready to assist well-managed local banks that were having difficulty with the capitalization, either to pick it up on their own or in merger with another bank or bank. So it's always been on the table. So this amalgamated trust was put together about 2-3 weeks ago to do that exercise. And since then, they've been talking behind the scenes with some of those who want to access that fund. I believe it's about 2 billion that's used to assist those who want to capitalize, but they are short. So that's really what the whole thing is about. And it's good because the government will be keeping to its pledge not to put depositors' funds at risk. So the 5 or 6 banks will be assisted to achieve their objective.
But Nana, I knew about this, and I knew that as at Friday night, there was a discussion that went deep into the night in the Flagstaff House on this one. But some are saying that what kept government so long that let's the last minute thing, if they really wanted to help these banks to recapitalize, they had a whole year to do that. Now, some are saying that you are rewarding banks who were not doing things right because there's a regulatory requirement. Nana, just a second. There was a regulatory requirement. They failed to meet it. And more of a fiat or a spite in the face of the Bank of Ghana?
Yeah, no, it's not that it's taking their too long. What happened, and you know very well, was that each bank was asked to bring their recapitalization plan. So that plan was to see how they will be able to raise the funds. Now, some of them were looking for foreign investors, looking for mergers and acquisitions, but as a backstop, the government assistance was always there, and that's why, as recent as 2-3 weeks ago, they put it in motion that those who made the effort but still cannot achieve it in one way or the other, because there's nothing like free lunch. So while they wanted investors, sometimes the conditions attached were such that the talks get fell through because they had so much conditions attached to giving you a PESWA or a CD for your bank. So I think it's, the timing is as good as ever.
Would it come with, and again, a lot of scenarios are being put forward here, would it come with some requirement where government will still have a stake in these banks?
Oh, well, even if they have, really the fund that is being used is from the pension fund. So they have to get no objection from the NPR, the regulator, which was one of the sticky issues. Also, once they gave the go-ahead, the trustees were able to put that together, plan together. So really, it's a short-term investment to help them to overcome the recapitalization, and then the monies that are given to them, the trustees will have to decide whether they are leaving them long-term or they are going to take them back at a later stage. But one of the things that going forward, all banks should be looking up to is this capital requirement directive. The directive now will be requiring a new method of calculating capital adequacy ratio. And for that purpose, the floor of 400 million is now set, but the ceiling is open, depending on the risk complexities that the bank is involved in. So going forward, every bank will now be extremely careful as to how they distribute or put the money that they have to use. The more risky ones you have, then the more capital that you need to be able to support that, so that we don't get into a situation that banks found themselves in before the 2007-2008 banking crisis. So that is what we call the capital buffer, where every bank will now have enough capital to support the risk that they are taking.
Nana, if this facility was kind of available, why wasn't it again extended to some of the banks that had to go down? Because for some of them, it was clear that they also needed some capital issue.
Yeah, you know the clause that was used, that these are well-managed local banks, and those that went down, or rather the opposite of that, throughout the 7 banks that went down, the problem they had was to do with corporate governance, how they had managed their assets and liabilities, and so on. So I think you have to make a distinction that this is not being given to any. And even one of them, they are ready to go back to SNL status, savings and loan status.
I know that bank as well. But the transfer wasn't coming in today. Sorry, Nana, go ahead.
Yeah, $500,000.
Yeah, you're right on that one, Nana.
They pay them out, and then they see how it goes. Yeah, so the well-managed banks are being safe as opposed to those that had to go down because the management or governance structures were poor.
Now, let me also find out from you, since you've also been in this space for quite a long time, what is the communication from these banks and then government and also to the Bank of Ghana? So that if, for instance, we close our books today, and I'm doing the audit, I know Banking Submission very busy right now, how would I classify these 5 banks or 6 banks? Have they met the capital requirement, or you've had a commitment, a paper being issued from government to BOG that I will make up for that shortfall?
No. I said earlier, you got an hour to go. And that hour, once it's right, once that hour right, then all those that would have met the conditions will be those that Bank of Ghana, maybe next week, from Tuesday onwards, we'll be talking about, Wednesday onwards, we'll be talking about. So these ones that are in talk, this is an issue of money. So these monies, if they are coming from pension trustees and so on, are certified money. And so if they are able to show that the trustees have agreed that they will release this sort of money, then they have recapitalized and there will be no problem. So I don't think there's much to.
Now, before I let you go, finally, your outlook for you, since we are having you on the phone, I'll quickly get your outlook. Going into 2018, are you that optimistic? Or some are saying that these problems will come back again?
No. I have hope in the new buffer Basel 2-3 that are being put in place. And they should be able to assist in ensuring that Bank of Ghana never comes back, as happens in other jurisdictions, to be requesting a minimum capital now going forward. And the minimum capital will automatically be cut through with the CRD, the Capital Requirement Directive, because that's what you are using
the risk base
for your system. But it employs a system we call ICAP, which is the internal assessment mechanism for deciding what capital you need to trade with. Or if you take the 22 or 30 banks, each of them has a different level of exposure. And so the regulatory capital is one size fits all. But this type of CRD differentiates between economic and regulatory capital. Your economic activity will decide what sort of capital you need over and above the 400 minimum. And so going forward, you won't be seeing this recapitalization going on unless the implementation of the CRD fails, which I don't think.
Now, I believe in your optimism, and I'll say that time will tell and we all live to see on that one. Thank you so much, to Champon. He's a banking consultant, sharing his thoughts on these banking issues. And I'll be coming to my guest in studio here, Professor Bob King, economist, financial lecturer, Thomas Emery. He's also an editor, Go Street Business. But before I come back to them on what is happening right now, race to recapitalize, we also saw the views of some players in this sector, of course, and Ken Thompson was one of them. And let's hear his thoughts on these whole banking issues and how things have been handled. Let's watch him.
Ghana's economy is largely informal. And the institutions that lend to this informal sector are the non-banks. I can also tell you that over the last 12 months, as usual, I go around, we speak to our people that do business with us, we share our strategy, and there's still some concern. People are concerned. And I hope that the Bank of Ghana moves quickly to deal with the non-bank sector. And I'm glad that Elsie said that before I did, because there's concern. And we can see huge withdrawals. There are people withdrawing their money. Most of them are withdrawing even before the maturity. And I can understand the concerns. I mean, you have credit unions who have put people's life savings in institutions. You have some of the messages not being consistent. And people really are concerned. I mean, the number of people that come to me and say, Mr. Thompson, I have all my money with Dalex Finance is frightening. And I can see the withdrawals. And we've got to remember that no financial institution is able to pay its depositors on demand. It's not possible. Normally, you keep maybe 10% reserve for people that come for their money when it matures, because the money you take, you don't keep it in your bank account. You use it for loans. But that 10% now is being breached. And if we don't manage it, once it gets to a point where people are not getting their money back, they get more worried, and the panic spreads, and everybody's affected. And without a robust financial system, this economy will collapse. And I'm not too worried about the people that go to banks. I'm worried about the wachi seller. I'm worried about the people that sell granules. I'm worried about the cocoa seller, because all those people borrow for business every day. Some of them even pay on the hour. So my take on this will be to say the Bank of Ghana, and I know it's difficult, but it has to be dealt with quickly and decisively, or else we're all in trouble.
And that was Ken Thompson sharing his thought at our financial services discussion that we held earlier this year at Golden Tulip. And expect more, actually, going into 2019. Joy Business and our discussions on the financial sector want to be coming very, very soon. Let me get back, Prof. Bob King and Thomas Emery, race to recapitalize. Now, there's news just coming, and we knew about this as far back as last week. Something was being put together. But it looks like some of these banks are also suspicious, so they're behind the scenes also trying to raise their own money to see how this thing will be worked out and close. Bob King, Prof, some are saying that, and some are saying that we are rewarding inefficiency, because I knew that, and you're making a point that the VC, as my friend, head of department, will give deadline for submitting long essays. I will flout it because I knew that VC will step in and save me.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much. I think that for some of these banks that have survived up to today, already suggests that they've been doing something slightly different from those that have gone under the water, and therefore perhaps they are alive to meet this intervention. Let me put it that way. I want to also believe that these indigenous banks, this won't be their first resort. This is almost like the last resort. They would prefer to be the 100% owner of that pie, rather than perhaps, because this will also have ownership implications and all of that, management and all of that. So I want to believe that apart from that, I think that there is also that fear that if these indigenous banks didn't make it and perhaps had to fold up, it's going to create a whole lot of
political
risk and all of that, employment, job losses.
Those issues came in the discussions, we understand on the platform.
Yes, and all of that. Remember, even with UT Bank and Capital Bank, others felt that the government could have done something about it, and then all of that. The same thing with what Obama also went through with Lehman Brothers.
Right,
they felt that, they could have acted a little and all of that. You see, because of the critical role that the banking industry plays, sometimes the level of intervention there may be slightly different from what it will happen with other industries and all of that, because you need a very robust banking industry, a very liquid banking industry to support the overall government economic strategy. That is not happening now. You can see that at the macro level, the fiscal side, government is doing so well and all of that, but the economy is not getting the much needed support from the financial sector. And I don't want to restrict it only to the banking sector, because the essence of money is that money goes round and round and round and round. But this time around, money is not going round. Money is held, stuck somewhere along the line. It's in itself not helping in terms of credit creation and all of that. Even when we talked about consolidated bank that we talked about, I mean, people are having difficulties accessing their money and all of
whether
that. So,
those bonds that were issued are liquid
and all of that. So what it means is that in terms of money going around from one person to the other and all of that, it's not happening. So there's a lot that we are losing because of those challenges. Even when you talk about men's gold and all of that.
We'll be getting to men's gold as well.
Okay, so let's hold that
again,
constant.
we are still sieving through the fine details of this, and you are a finance person. I'll be coming to you, Bob Kun, as well. We are hearing that, again, pension funds are kind of being used here and there. And I need to be educated in this space. But my money, again, if these banks were managed well, and it's not just a sentimental argument about, local banks against foreign banks, some would have said they wouldn't have got into this space. I knew at a point in time, Senate wanted to put together the banks that it has interest. Politically, it was fought. So I have issues with the fact that pension funds are being used. And if it's right, and again, I stand to be educated, I have issues with that one, Prof.
So pension...
I'll come to you, Thomas.
Yes. Already, whatever contributions we have made in that sector, we have handed it over to certain trustees or people to manage it on our behalf. My understanding is that they've done the analysis and they believe that it's ultimately in the best interest of workers, and that is why they are doing that going forward. So that is how I'll look at it from that particular point of view. But I also want to know that money doesn't come free. It's still very early for us to pass certain judgment, especially as an academic. You want to be able to have the full facts to be able to do your analysis. So perhaps we would want to look at the terms under which these interventions are coming to these banks. Then we'll be able to assess. But let me say that if you look at Ghana's banking industry overall, I mean, it still has potential to grow. And therefore, if you invest in that sector and it comes along with good governance practices and all of that, you will be getting good returns. It's one of the lucrative industries, even regardless of the challenges that we have gone through.
After all, they have high rates, of course.
We went through all of this largely because of bad management practices, aided significantly by some shareholders in some of the banks who should have perhaps done better. And in putting the right corporate governance arrangement and all of that. The issue is not just putting those arrangements, but you have to respect them and
again,
all those things. So I think that the industry is still quite lucrative, and I want to believe that it has come at a time where it will go with a lot of restructuring. And the reason I'm saying so is that even though we are talking about all these things, the central bank will have to reform, because the kind of assessment they were doing under the previous regime, for which many of these banks had the leeway to do all these things, if they continue along those same paths, it will not be long, and then we will mess up at very soon. So these are, but I want to believe that there are sufficient measures that they are putting in place to ensure. If these banks wanted to grow, they would have, because once they passed that act, the Banks and Specialized Deposit-Taking Institutions Act 2016, Act 930, I think, and all of that. Obviously, we knew that there needed to be a scaling up of the minimum capital and all of that. But these banks failed to plan with the act and all of that. And you could see those shareholders were taking their instead of plowing back the profit to grow the bank, they were not doing so. They were using some of the profits and maybe to run their parties or maybe to set up other businesses and all of that. Then scattered the attention so much that at the end of the day, they were exposed.
I'll see whether I can get my producer to roll this one again on the screen. Then a lot of documents and a lot of things are indeed flying around, depending on where you're getting it from and all the rest. And I'll get back to you whether for you think it's a good thing or not. And I'll see whether she can do that for you. But again, what we are picking up is that it will be a $2 billion, around that $2.2 billion dollar special purpose vehicle. That is the Ghana Amalgamated Vehicle, SPV. That is, or whatever, a special purpose vehicle, and that will be the Ghana Amalgamated Trust Limited, which government incorporated on December 17th. There were discussions around that time again, and we can confirm that one. The SPV is supposed to mobilize funds through the issuance of bonds that will be sold to both domestic and foreign markets. One, the source involved adds that is structured at the last-minute bailout package. It added that the bond is partially guaranteed by government to make it, quote, sweetener and comfortable to investors. Lots of technical jargons and all the rest. But the clear thing is that more of a bond to be issued again and serve my layman's word, all these things can even be classified as a bailout or not.
Or maybe once they are using the special purpose vehicle, perhaps in their mind, it won't be added to the debt stock.
So Prof, I mean, for you, wrapping up on this, I'll come to for you. So for you, do you think it's a good thing?
Well, I think that, George, is where we find ourselves. It's like you have compliance that is born out of necessity rather than love, because we don't have a lot of options. The clock has been taken, and we just have some few hours and all of that. So I think at the end of the day, I would say that it's a good intervention to resolve the uncertainty and all of that, and to also restore confidence in the banking industry. And my understanding is that even though some people think that this is the right time, I think this should have been done a couple of maybe weeks ago, because we don't need to come to 31st December 2018 only to know that, hey, now this is the package that is out there. I mean, a lot of damage would have been done to customer confidence in some of these banks, panic withdrawal and all of that. So we didn't,
some of the banks, let's talk about even GHL and First National Bank, they were not comfortable with the information getting out because the fear was that it could trigger a panic withdrawal. If, for instance, I don't like First National Bank, then I'll go out there and move my money. But Thomas, let me bring you in about the signal that it sends again. And depending on where you are standing, different interpretations being put on this. Some are saying it's a spite in the face of Bank of Ghana. Some are saying that this is what the whole political economy is about. There was a similar structure in U.S. The U.S. government came in, they built out these banks, they made their money, they paid back. So for those who might be complaining about this and raising red flags, it's more of much I do about nothing.
Let's remember that this is not the first time Ghana has done this thing. In the 1980s, the World Bank and the government of Ghana created FinTrust to bail out. And that was the case of insolvency. This is a case of capital, minimum capital. So it's not a case now of, so you can't actually call it a bailout. This is not a case of government bringing money to save banks which were about to go under. It's a case of banks that were basically okay, but they have been required to increase their capital, and they don't immediately have access to enough capital to meet the new minimum. So it's not like it's a banks that have failed. The banks are okay, but they've been asked to increase their capital base, and they are not in a position to do it.
Is it not because we put always a negative spin on the word bailout? Because if some financial arrangement is being put together to help you deal with something, whatever you might choose to call it.
A bailout connotes a bank in difficulty, which is being taken out of the difficulty. In this case, it's simply a matter of the bank is not, I mean, if you look at all the ratios, they're okay. It's just that they've been asked to come up to a new minimum capital level, which they were not able to do. And that is my problem with the whole
thing. Let me bring you the bit about the signal again that it sends across regulatory issue, who would have the final say, who would have the final dance, and who would have that final glass of water, or whether it's alcohol or it's wine that would drink and say, cheers, I have sailed through.
Well, the thing is this, George. the Bank of Ghana has not shifted from its position. The Bank of Ghana said from the beginning that this is the new minimum. Come December 31st, if you have not met the new minimum, you are out. Bank of Ghana has not changed from it. It is government once again that has now stepped in on its own to provide the money. The money being provided to the banks, it does not involve Bank of Ghana. That's between government and the said banks. You understand? What Bank of Ghana is concerned about is that come midnight December or close of work today, December 31st, if you have not met the new minimum, you have your license revoked. Government has come in to ensure that that does not happen to those 6 banks. Of course, what Bank of Ghana's concern is to make sure that the money coming in is genuine. It's not from money laundering or terrorist money or something, which of course it's not, because it's money coming from government. So Bank of Ghana is okay, and Bank of Ghana says, well, okay. So the Bank of Ghana here, in this case, it's not like I'm trying to sound like the defense lawyer for Bank of Ghana, but Bank of Ghana has not gone wrong.
They seem to have found a special place in your heart.
No. Hold on. There are places like Bank of Ghana. There are places where I'll be very happy to blame Bank of Ghana, but not in this case. In this case, banks have come and said, okay, look, guys, we have the money. And Bank of Ghana said, okay, you have the money. Fine. Where do you get the money from? From government. So what Bank of Ghana going to say? Bank of Ghana say, because it's from government, we will not agree. I mean, they can't do that. No.
I mean, that's certainly not.
Prof, let me bring you in. I mean, some would say, and you play in the economic space as well, that it is always about the political economy, and that would always take precedence over whatever regulatory issues that would happen in any space that you find yourself.
It's not unique to Ghana alone. You'll find it across a number of countries as well. But I think how we use it is very, very important to support business and all of that. That is more important than all of that. But I'll come back to the same thing. I think that the last 24 months or so, the central bank has acted quite swiftly. It hasn't been a soft decision. It hasn't been easy for them and all of that. If you look at the criticism, especially, and these are local banks, and the drive to preserve indigenous banks, local content within the banking industry, and all of that, we are such that sometimes we need to make certain sacrifices, lower the belt a bit in order to accommodate ourselves. These are local banks. These are Ghanaian banks. If they do it well and they make profit, it stays here, which is very, very good. I'm happy to the extent that, and I wasn't happy initially when people were just flying from airport to here looking for capital. Let's look within, so that if we are able to get a capital from within, put in place the right corporate governance measures, and the central bank does its work, supervision and all of that very, very well. Whatever profit they make, it stays here, and which is very good for our economy. Because if you see the extent of foreign ownership in our economy and the effect even towards the financial end and all of that, it hasn't been that supportive.
What would you tell those who would say that the ends justify the means? And Toma, some would say that the way things are ending, in terms of regulatory issues as well, would it have been done better?
No, I will support that assertion here on one basis. You read the financial stability reports that the Bank of Ghana issues from now and again. The incident of loan repayment defaults that occur in Ghana, the incidence is far, far, far higher among local enterprises than among foreign enterprises. Now, who lends to the local enterprises? It's the local banks.
Yes.
The fact that without the local banks, the foreign banks will look at the loan records of these local enterprises and they will not get any credit.
But the chunk of that loan is coming from government. Government actually, when you do the proper due diligence on these numbers, NPLs, it's exposure to government.
There's a certain level of...
No, but I'm talking about private enterprise now. I'm talking about private enterprise outside state-owned enterprise. I'm talking about privately owned private enterprise. Still, the loan default incidence is much higher in local privately owned companies.
If you look at the asset composition of some of these banks, especially the foreign banks, they are comfortable to do the big ticket transaction in oil and gas. I hope you understand that. Issue LC for importation of fuel and all of that. And they make huge margins than dealing with local mere mortals. Let me put it that way and all of that. So I think that is why
who tend not to pay their loans when they do get them.
So if you look at also our SMEs are not that attractive to these foreign banks. These are these same local banks that we understand ourselves. And therefore, if we have to sacrifice and make certain interventions to meet them halfway, I think that is very good. That's why I say it's still early, because we have to be able to understand the terms under which these interventions are going to be made, and then the necessary. So
no, hold on, I'll come back. So for you, it looks like there wouldn't be any casualty based on this arrangement.
It looks like they've scaled the wall.
It had to happen. I mean, we were expecting it, and it just had to happen.
And so nothing would happen.
Yes.
Quickly, as we wrap up on this, and let's do the men's goal issue as well.
George, one quick thing. Remember, just try to think like the political class. Remember, we are considering all the issues that might eventually result out of this solution that come up with.
Political,
those are for the future. The problem that will have been created on December 31st at the close of work has been solved. Whatever problems will come later. Now, all the guys in charge can go to church tonight and go and thank God, after which they can go and have fun without having any particular worries.
It's not only for the bank managers, but for the customers,
for the customer,
the depositors, and all of that.
All
so
the uncertainties and worries have been pushed forward.
It's good that we've been able to scale that word. That is why I said that this should have been announced much earlier, and all of that. We don't have to wait till almost the last minute to come out with this. Some would have suffered some all kinds of things before, but I think it's still good that it has happened. I understand your concern. I share with your concern in terms of that intervention, whether we are rewarding inefficiency or all of that. But the understanding is that these banks have stayed up to today because they've been doing certain things right, and the government has signaled that they will support indigenous banks.
And they will not insolvent.
I beg to differ whether they were doing all things right, and I would want to move away. I want to move away from the sentimental issue, because I would always bring up the Senate argument where at a point in time they wanted to create a strong local bank, and that idea was put forward. So for me, it's not about whether it is local or foreign. I believe that there have been several attempts to put together strong local banks, which some of these individual banks have fought because of their political connections, and they still want to be MDs of these banks.
Yeah, George, I agree with you. We are in crisis time, and therefore the interventions may not fit all the boxes, but something has to be done. That is how I see it going forward. But look, it's too early to smile, because if you look at the entire financial market, we have a lot of unresolved issues. So far, we are just focusing on the banking industry. We haven't talked about the microfinance sector. We haven't talked about savings and loans. Beyond that, we are yet to come to the capital market, investment companies, and all of that.
And for the banks who are smiling now, risk-based capital, depending on your exposure, you are supposed to again up your capital again. Otherwise, you cannot play in certain space that will bring you the profit.
Precisely. It would encourage them to take risk, and that is where the risk-based capital prescription is also important. This is not strange. If you go back to that act right from 2016 when it was passed, I mean, you see all these things there. Automatically, we knew that these are the implications, and banks needed to prepare. But I'm not too sure whether the banks, some of these local banks, fully incorporated the provisions of the act from day one. And so, because if you look at when perhaps they thought that at the beginning the central bank wasn't that serious with the deadline, but when they realized that the central bank was very serious, the time was also too short even to talk about serious mergers and acquisitions. Which merger and acquisition can you discuss over a 3-month period?
But Prof, in that case, why was it that two banks, having decided this was the situation, they couldn't do the MIAs because of time? But finally, when they realized Bank of Ghana was not going to change the deadline, they actually started merger in December. Just a couple of weeks ago.
Let's rate how the Bank of Ghana.
I hope you are not going to shoot it down.
I'm not going to start. I'm supposed to be an independent person here, so my views doesn't matter.
Yes. All right.
I'm angry at the way certain things are.
We'll score for you.
Let's first look at how the Bank of Ghana handled the 5 banks that actually went down. Toma, green means what? So going ahead, yes. You thought it was okay.
Yes.
Toma?
It was okay as a stopgap solution.
I still think that approach could have been a little bit different. Maybe still have the banks there and even just change the management and all those things.
They were insolvent.
One or two banks.
They were living on emergency liquidity assistance.
let's look at government
From the central
intervention. Government intervention on these banks that are said to be going this. I give a red down. I have issues with that one. Of course, it wasn't just today that these banks were told to recapitalize.
Yeah.
There were banks that had partners coming in to actually give them lots of dollars to recapitalize. They turned it down. They were attempted by snakes to put together.
Because you don't want to dilute the ownership.
Turned down.
The
Some are
ownership
saying that.
listing.
So suppose as a special purpose vehicle for these 6 banks. Now we understand. I'm not supposed to have a view, but I'm giving a red down on this one, Prof.
I will do this.
I go sideways. I go sideways because there are pros and cons to the whole thing. You know, I mean, look, yes, it has solved an immediate problem facing us, but I also, just like you, I have my worries about rewarding the local owners for. I mean, the clear fact that they have managed the thing, they have managed their institutions poorly because of their personal financial desires. And they are still looking for ways to maintain the authority to do such into the future. But they don't, that's why they don't want to dilute their ownership stakes, relying on government to eventually bail them out, which is what government has now done. The other side of it, what I have hope in is that the Bank of Ghana has come up with certain directives that will now tie their hands against the worst forms of ownership malfeasance.
Let me also give reasons why I'll do this, because I think that the system is working again with what the central bank is doing. The central bank is leading quite strongly. In the last couple of months, we've seen that. And I also think that there is the need to preserve the local content in the economy. There's the need to support the local banks and all of that. But also, if you look at the arrangement in terms of the special purpose vehicle and all of that, it's not like free money they are just giving to these banks and all of that. Ultimately, it's going to have implication for the ownership structure of these banks, and that ultimately will also have implication for managerial, top managerial, the board and all of that. And once Bank of Ghana keeps on enforcing those directives that they are coming out with and all of that. Look, if you look at under Basel 1, Basel 2, and even the Act, once the central bank is diligent in terms of its own assessment and all of that, and they also need to scale up capacity in terms of risk management department of the central bank and all of that, because hey, you only, I mean, if you get onto the ground and some of these bank managers or employees know a lot more even than people coming from the central bank. Really, what is the point and all of that? So in terms of risk management and all of that, we need to scale up in terms of capacity building and all of that. And then we all build an economy that we can all participate in fully.